Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today in Yirtzeh Hashem Daf Chav Zayin Amid Beis. We're continuing to learn Hilchas Tisha B'Av. We're holding in Siman Tafkuf Nun Aleph, and we have been discussing the prohibition of eating meat and drinking wine during the 9 days. That's according to our minig. We're makbid like the Ramah. We don't eat meat, drink wine during the 9 days. That's the minig that most of us follow. And we mentioned yesterday in Chav Zayin Amid Aleph, we mentioned that there are exceptions to this rule, namely a Sudas mitzvah. And the examples that the Ramah gave were the Suda of a Bris Milah, the Suda of a Pinyan Aben, and the very well-known exception of the Suda of a Siyam. When somebody celebrates a Siyam, when they finish a Masechta of Gemara, or they finish a Seder of Mishnayos, or they finish learning according to Rav Moshe Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Lavracha, you could make a Siyam after learning one of the Sifrei Tanakh, if you learn it with one of the Pirushim of the Rishonim, so you have a basic understanding of it, and you learned it well, then you can make a Siyam even after completing one of the Sifrei Tanakh. So if one celebrates a Siyam, that's also a Sudas mitzvah where you could serve meat and you could serve wine. And the Ramah on the bottom of Chav Zayin Amid Aleph had said that you have to be careful who it is that you invite to these Sudas. And the words of the Ramah were, Kol hashayachim la Seuda. Anybody who has a reasonable attachment to the Suda, you could invite. The Ramah said that you should be careful. You shouldn't just go ahead and invite people that normally wouldn't come. And the Mishnah Berurah between Ois Katan Hey and Ois Katan Ayin Vav on Chav Zayin Amid Aleph, the Mishnah Berurah explained that who's considered somebody who can reasonably be invited to partake of such a Sudas mitzvah and have meat and wine. Those are the type of people that you would normally invite to such an event. So those are relatives, good friends, but people who you normally would not invite to such an event, and now suddenly you want to be nice to your neighbor in the bungalow colony, and you want to say, I'm making a siyum, this will give you an excuse to go grill and have a hot dog. That is not proper, and we had brought down the lashon of the Aruch HaShulchan, who said that it's even a davar mechuar, it's a disgusting practice. So it's definitely something we should refrain from. Now, the final two words in the Ramah on Chav Zayin Amid Aleph, the Ramah says, Uba Shavua Shachal Tisha B'Av B'Seicha. Once we reach the Shvua Shachal B'Av, once we reach the week of Tisha B'Av itself, says the Ramah, Ein Le'echal Basar V'Lishtois Yayin Rak Minyan Mitzumtzum. Once we reach the Shvua Shachal B'Av, once we reach the week of Tisha B'Av itself, then the Ramah says, even by a Sudas mitzvah, only a minyan mitzumtzum, only exactly 10 people should go ahead and eat meat and drink wine by this Suda, even though it's a Sudas mitzvah. Now that's what the words of the Ramah seem to mean, Rak minyan mitzumtzum, exactly a minyan, but let's take a look at the words of the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Ayin Zayin. Rak minyan mitzumtzum, says the Chavetz Chaim. What does that mean, a minyan mitzumtzum? Hainu milvad hakroivim hapsulim le'edus. This is with the exception of the relatives of the Baal Simcha, the close relatives of the Baal Simcha, which the Mishnah Berurah defines as the relatives that would not be allowed to say testimony on your behalf. So, for example, your brother, your father, they're pasal edus. They're not allowed to say testimony on any court, any litigation that you're involved in. They would be pasal edus because of korva, because they're relatives. So they don't count towards the minyan mitzumtzum. Umilavad habali mitzvah. And also, with the exception of the bali mitzvah themselves. So, for example, by a siyam, the one who's making the siyam on the Masechta, he doesn't count. If 3 people are getting together and making a siyam, it doesn't mean that they each learned part of the Masechta. Let's say 3 people who learned a Masechta together. So there are 3 Bali Simcha. The Bali Simcha don't count, and their close relatives don't count. So besides them, you could have a minyan mitzumtzum. And if you take a look in the Sharet Sionis Katan Pei Hey, the Chavetz Chaim says that by a bris, the sandik by the bris, V'hamachnis v'hamoitzi, and the ones who bring the baby in and take the baby out, shekarin kvater, the ones that we call the kvater, nami hu bechlal zeh, they're considered the balei mitzvah, so they don't count towards the minyan. You can have a minyan besides them. So again, the Mishnah Berurah says, when we say a minyan mitzumtzum, hainu milavada kroivim apsulim le'edus, this is besides the close relatives of the balei mitzvah, the balei simcha, mitzvah, and besides the Bali mitzvah themselves, mutter lahaisef asara, you could add on another minyan, you could add on another 10 besides these people, mishum reus, for friendship's sake. V'ashar oichle ma'achalei chalav, but the other guests to this Sudas mitzvah during the Shvur Shechalbai, they would have to eat milchiks. They can't eat fleishiks. V'hinei b'levush kasav, the Chavetz Chaim brings down from the levush, the Levush was more machmer. The Levush said that this chomer of the Ramah is not only during the Shvur Shechalbai, the Levush applies it even to the entire 9 days. And he says, V'yesh loichem asar melevad hakroivim hashayachim lebalasuda. The Levush says, okay, during the 9 days you can have a minyan mitzumtzum, but that's besides, again, the close relatives. So the Levush is more machmer, and he says that this chumrah of the Ramah applies not only during the Shvur Shechalbai, but even for the entire 9 days. V'hinei b'chai Adam, what the Chavetz Chaim brings down from the Chai Adam, hetek kalavush, the Chai Adam seems to rule like the Levush. Avo b'derech hachayim, mashma in the derech hachayim, it is implied to yuchal linoik lahakel kedas haramah. We could be maker like the Ramah, from the beginning of the 9 days, from Rosh Chodesh Av until the Shvur Shechalbai, during the time from Rosh Chodesh until the Shvur Shechalbai, you can invite, like we said yesterday, anybody who has a reasonable connection to the Sudas mitzvah, the type of people that you normally would invite to such an event. But during the Shvur Shechalbai, you should be machmer like the Ramah. Let's say a bris milah falls out on Shabbos, and it's the Shabbos that is Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av fell out on a Shabbos, and the tainus is a nitche to Sunday. Then certainly, if you have a bris or you have another Sudas mitzvah on the Shabbos of Tisha B'Av, you can invite whoever you want because it's Shabbos. Now continues the Ramah on the top line. V'zeh afilu be'erev Tisha B'Av shari. To have a Sudas mitzvah and to invite a minyan mitzumtzum, that's even mutter on erev Tisha B'Av itself, or b'alvad sh'layiyah b'suda shemafsikba. As long as we're not dealing with the Suda Mafsekes. By the Suda Mafsekes, you're not allowed to have fleishiks no matter what. Even if you have some kind of Sudas mitzvah, you want to make a siyum, whatever it is. By the Suda Mafsekes, you're not allowed to have fleishiks at all. But if you do have a Sudas mitzvah on Erev Tisha B'Av in the morning, then you can have your minyan mitzumtzum besides your close relatives. And the Mishnah Berurah says in Ois Kotnayin Ches be'erev Tisha B'Av shari u'belvad she'yasena kodim chatzos, as long as it's before chatzos. If you look at the Shari Tzion, it brings this down from the Magen Avraham. Okay, now we go to the second line of the Shulchan Aruch Sif Yod Aleph. Kol mi she'oichel basar b'makai mishenayagim by iser. Anybody who does eat fleishiks in a locale and during a time when the minig is not to, pirates geder who, he's a pirate's geder, he's breaching the fences that were set up by our chazal, v'yinshechenu nachash, and he should be bitten by a snake. I don't think anybody wants chas v'chalila to have a klala from the mechaber, a klala from Rabbi Yosef Kairoi. Nobody wants to try and risk suffering that the wrath of such a klala. And this is the words of the mechaber. Anybody who improperly eats fleishiks in a locale and during a time when the minig is not to, pirates gederu, he's breaching a fence, v'yinshechenu nachash, and he should be bitten by a snake. Umuter lishtais kol sheichard, Ramah says here in the parentheses, while we do have a prohibition to drink yayin, or wine, grape juice, according to Rav Moshe, You're allowed to drink beer, afilu shel dvash shekar mead, even this kind of honey beer that we've discussed before, which was an alcoholic beverage that they had in those days. You're allowed to drink it during the 9 days. Sif Yud Beis. Tispairis Shavua Zeh. Let's remember that according to the Mechaber mentioned earlier, I think it was in Sif Gimel, when the Mechaber spoke about the prohibition to have a haircut during this time period. The Mechaber's opinion was that that's Negeya, that applies to the Shavua Shechalboi, to the week that Tisha B'Av falls out. We're noyeg like the Ramah, we're noyeg to be machmir already from Rosh Chodesh. We don't take haircuts already the entire 3 weeks from Shiva, right? From Shiva B'Tammuz. Yeah, when it comes to haircuts, we're makbid. Why am I not seeing it? 1 second. That was the Mechaber. Here it is. Yeah, in Siv Daled on Chaf Heyom and Beis, that's where the Ramah said, "V'nayagin lahachmir b'tchilas Rosh Chodesh lin kibus aval tispeiris." But when it comes to haircuts, nayagim lahachmir mishiva asa b'tamuz. We stop taking haircuts already at Shiva asa b'tamuz. We don't take haircuts for the entirety of the 3 weeks. But the Ramah, the Mechaber over here in Sif Yud Beis, is writing according to his opinion, according to his minig. So he writes tispeiris shavua zeh, taking haircuts during this week, during the Shavuot Shechalbai, which is when the Mechaber wrote not to take haircuts, Echad Roishai, it doesn't matter, it pertains to the hair of the head, Ve'echad Kol Seir Shabai, or any other hair on the body, Aser is all forbidden. Now let's take a look here. In the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Kat Nayin Test, the Chavetz Chaim says, Ve'echad Ha'ish, Ve'echad Ha'isha Shavin Le'isr. This prohibition applies equally to men and to women. The efsher sheyesh lahater be'isha, it could be that you could be lenient and you could be matir by a woman, legaleach ribui seor ditstoyin, if she has a lot of hair on the temples or on the side of her face, it could be that you could be makel for that, shaloi tiskana al baila. I believe that's the reason that the Pri Megadim says. All right, so again, the Mechaber wrote this Sif Yud Beis according to his minig, and his minig was not to take haircuts during the Shavuot Shechalbai. We follow the Ramah, so we don't take haircuts already for the entire Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. So it would seem that the words of the Mechaber here apply to us, apply to our minig. So then, according to us, where we don't take haircuts for the entire 3 weeks, so it doesn't matter. It applies equally to the hair of the head or hair anywhere else on the body. And the Chavetz Chaim here in Ayin Tes equates men and women. So now the question becomes, okay, how about a woman shaving her legs or things of that matter? So if you take a look, I took a look in Reb Simcha Bunim Cohn's Sefer on the 3 weeks, published by Art Scroll, beautiful Sefer. And he brings down from the Rishiva Zatzal, from Rav Moshe Zecher Tzaddik Kadosh Levracha, that a married woman or a young lady who's already in the age of shidduchin, a young lady of marriageable age, can shave the legs. He also brings down from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach that a woman could tweeze her eyebrows. And he says that tweezing eyebrows is not called tispeiris. That's not called a haircut. So, okay, and it seems that that's the way people are noyeg l'maisa, that a woman could shave her legs, they could tweeze their eyebrows. Okay. Now we go to Sif Yud Gimel. Ubazakon, as far as the beard and the mustache, kol shema'akev es ha'achila mutter. I know that me, myself, sometimes when you have a beard and you have a mustache, if the hairs get too long, they start to get in between your lips. They start to get in your mouth. it becomes very uncomfortable. It's not hygienic. And sometimes it's also a hair could come off and get into your mouth. And then you could swallow a hair. You have issues of choking. So that could be very, very uncomfortable. And you're not, if you trim that, it's not because of simcha, it's because of need. So therefore, the Mechaber says over here, Bazakon, Kol Shema'akev Esa'achila mutter. Anything that interferes with eating is mutter. You're allowed to trim that. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and pay, Ubazakon, Vahainu Hasafa. This is a reference to the mustache, to the hair of the lips, that you're allowed to trim them. Now we go to Sif Yodalid. Very interesting. Says the Mechaber, Aser la gedolim lisaper la ketanim. An adult is not allowed to give a child a haircut. I'm going to stop there for a moment. So, included in the prohibition of haircuts during the time that we're noyig not to take haircuts, so for us during the entire 3 weeks, is that you're not allowed to give a child a haircut either. Now, why aren't you allowed to give a child a haircut? Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah is cut and pay aleph. Says the Chavetz Chaim l'saper l'ketanim, you're not allowed to give a haircut to a minor child. The ketanim nami shayich behu chinuch. Very interesting statement. The Chavetz Chaim says that the child is an inyan of chinuch. You have a chiyuv of chinuch to be mechanech the child, to train the child in the isurim that apply during these time periods. So if there is an isur to take a haircut during the 3 weeks, you have a chiyuv to be mechanech the child not to take a haircut. And the Chavetz Chaim continues, and he says, what exactly is this chiyuv of chinuch? I misham avelus, either because there's a chiyuv to be mechanechim in the concept of avelus, of mourning over the churban, or misham agmas nefesh, or it could be because of agmas nefesh, aggravation, which I assume what the Chavetz Chaim means. He means that agmas nefesh for us. In other words, this is a time period of aggravation. This is a time period of not happiness. And therefore, if the child has long hair and he looks disheveled, well, that's appropriate for the 3 weeks. The 3 weeks is not a happy, go lucky, everything is fine time period. No, you're supposed to have a certain amount of agnos nefesh during this time. So yeah, the kid needs a haircut. Well, that's the way it's going to be. It's the 3 weeks. Now, what's interesting about this is that we had earlier in Siman Tuf Kuf Nun, in Mishnah Berurah Ice Cotton Hay, Tuf Kuf Nun, I think it was, Tuf Kuf Nun, Mishnah Berurah Ice Cotton Hay. So that's back on Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. In the Mishnah Berurah, he speaks about a katan fasting. And he says, V'chein haktanim sheyesh lehem das lehisabel. When it comes to a katan, when it comes to a minor child who already has an understanding of what it means to mourn over the Beis Hamikdash, af al gav she'ein mechuyavim lechancham, even though you have no chiyuv of chinuch to be mechanech the child to fast, afilu ben shteim esrei shana, even if he's already 12 years old, so he's already almost bar mitzvah, va'afilu b'tanis shois, and even to be mechanech the child to fast a few hours on Tisha B'Av, you have no chiyuv of chinuch, says the Chavetz Chaim. Mikal Malka, nevertheless, royal lechancham, it's appropriate to train them shelo yochlu, that they should not eat rak kedei kiyam aguf, only what they need to sustain themselves. Lechem umayim, bread and water, oishar michael pashut, or some other simple foods, lefi atinoik, according to the child's needs, kedei sheyisablu im atzibur, so that they should mourn over the churban together with the tzibur. So it's very interesting. In Siman Tuf Kuf Nun, when we're speaking about the tainus, the Chavetz Chaim says clearly that there is no chiyuv of chinuch on the tainus. Over here, when we're speaking about haircuts, the Chavetz Chaim says that there is a chiyuv of chinuch, and that chiyuv of chinuch is either his abel, it's an inyan to train him to be misabel on the churban, or it's because of agmas nefesh. So first of all, we have to understand what's the chiluk, what's the difference between these two halachas. Why is it that the Chavetz Chaim says that there's no chiyuv of chinuch by tainus, but there is a chiyuv of chinuch over here by haircuts? And another problem is, what does the Chavetz Chaim mean over here that there could be a chiyuv of chinuch because of avelus? He says over here, imishom avelus. It could be that the chiyuv of chinuch is based on avelus, we know that the rule is ein avelus l'ktanim. We don't have a concept of avelus by a katan. That's what we say in Yeridea. So why over here suddenly do we have a chinuch of avelus? So as far as why there's no chiyuv of chinuch on the tainus, after doing some research, I found 3 different reasons brought down why there's no chiyuv of chinuch on the tainus. One reason that's brought down, and this is brought down from the Chai Adam, and I confess that at this point in time I don't fully understand the meaning of the Chai Adam. The Chai Adam says that anything where there's no iser mitzad atzmai, there is no iser in taking a haircut. Taking a haircut, there's no iser in eating. You're allowed to eat. You're always allowed to eat. On Tisha B'Av, there's a din that today there's a tainus. So the Chai Adam, the words of the Chai Adam are that anything where there's no iser mipnei atzmai, anything that's not intrinsically usher, any action which is not intrinsically usher. For example, it's intrinsically usher to eat chazer. You're not allowed to eat tarfus. That's intrinsically usher. It's intrinsically usher to wear shatnez. That's an intrinsically forbidden act. There are other acts that are intrinsically forbidden. Speaking Lashon Hara is intrinsically forbidden. Over there, there's a chiyuv of chinuch to train a child. You're not allowed to do this thing. You train him when he's young, so he shouldn't come to do it when he's older. But eating is not an intrinsically prohibited act. You're always allowed to eat. There's a few days during the year that you're not allowed to eat when there's a tainus. That, the Chai Adam says that there's no chiyuv of chinuch on. But I'm not sure how to fully understand that, because what does that mean? There are things that are usher on Shabbos. Is there a chiyuv of chinuch on Shabbos? Turning on a light is not intrinsically usher. It's only intrinsically usher on Shabbos. So I have to research that Chai Adam a little bit more to fully understand the Chai Adam. Then the Chachmas Adam says an interesting thing. The Sefer Chachmas Adam says the reason why there's no chiyuv of chinuch on the tainus is because there's no chiyuv of chinuch on a davar sheyesh by tsar. Something that causes suffering, there's no chiyuv of chinuch on. And tainus is suffering. So there's no chiyuv of chinuch to make a young child suffer. That's what the Chachmas Adam says. And lastly, the Rama Bipano says that there's no chiyuv of chinuch on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Now, that's a mouthful to say that there's no chiyuv of chinuch on mitzvah d'Rabbanan, because certainly there are mitzvahs d'Rabbanan where we have a chiyuv of chinuch. It's brought down that we bring a child to hear the Megillah, even though Megillah is only a d'Rabbanan. So there certainly is a mitzvah of chinuch on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So it seems that what he means is that the mitzvah of chinuch on a d'Rabbanan, and this is what the Mefarshim say, the mitzvah of chinuch on a d'Rabbanan is more lenient than the chiyuv of chinuch on a d'Oraisa. On a din d'Oraisa, you have a very powerful chiyuv chinuch. On a din d'Rabbanan, it's more kal. And since it's more kal, when it comes to something like a tainus, where even with a 12-year-old child, it's possible that a child could suffer too much from fasting. He could even get sick from fasting. So on a chiyuv of chinuch, on a din d'Rabbanan, to fast, that chiyuv of chinuch they didn't put on you. So these are various explanations of why the Chavetz Chaim says back in Siman Kuf Nun that there is no chiyuv of chinuch on the tainus. But there is a chiyuv of chinuch on something like this, on not taking a haircut during the 3 weeks, that there is a chiyuv of chinuch on. Now, as far as the issue of why is there a chiyuv of chinuch if this is avelus, usually we say ein avelus l'ktanim. So why suddenly now do we say that there's a chiyuv of avelus? So on that, I saw brought down from the Aruch HaShulchan, right? That's where I found it. There's a very beautiful Aruch HaShulchan here. The Aruch HaShulchan says like this. He says, "Da'afal gav de'ein avelus l'katan," even though the halachic rule is that there is no mourning for a katan, kemasha kasa b'yaridei simin shin pei dalet siv zayin in hilchos avelus, zehu b'stam avelus. That's by normal avelus. By normal avelus, we say ein avelus l'katan. Aval ba'avelus derabim, but by an avelus for the whole tzibur, when the whole tzibur is an avelus over the churban, shehu zichrain lechurban beis kachenu, which is in remembrance of the loss of our base kachenu, of the base hamikdash, roi lechanech gam haktanim. Over there, it's appropriate to even be mechanech ktanim in avelus. V'lav mishum da avelus zu chamira mistam avelus. Not because this is a more important avelus or a more stringent avelus. That's not why. Dadarabba, sheyesh dvarim shemekalinin ba'avelus yeshana. There are times that when there's an avelus, which is an old avelus, it's an avelus of something that happened a long time ago, we're more mekel, kidarmina b'yavamas ayin sham. Ella, rather, why is it important to train children in the avelus over the churban? Debazeh yesh chinuch liyiras Hashem. Because this is not chinuch in avelus. This, says the Aruch HaShulchan, is chinuch in yiras shamayim. That's what this chinuch is. Shahakatan kishayishal al mazeh, when the katan asks, why can't I take a haircut during the 9 days? Yavinu loy inyan churban beis hamikdash. Now you're going to have to explain to him the concept of the churban bias. You're going to have to explain to him the loss that Klal Yisrael suffers from not having a Beis Hamikdash, from not having the Shechina Shruya B'Seichenu. These are basic concepts in your Shamayim to understand what it means to have a connection, to have dveikus with the Bari Olam, to have the Shechina Shruya B'Seichenu, the loss of the Beis Hamikdash. That's your Shamayim. So therefore the Aruch HaShulchan says, yes, now it is appropriate to have avelus for a cotton if it's avelus over the Beis Hamikdash, because that's chinuch in your shamayim, not just chinuch in avelus. Okay. Now let's go weiter in the Shulchan Aruch. So I'm just going to read again from the beginning of Sif Yodalit. Also, like doilim l'saper l'ktanim, it's forbidden for an adult to give a haircut to a child, u'lechabes kisusam, or to wash their laundry, b'shabbos shechal tisha b'av liyos b'seicha, during the shvua shechal boy, during the week that Tisha B'av falls out. Now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in pei beis b'shabbos shechal ayin be'li rabba diladi done. Like I mentioned earlier in this year, according to the Mechaber said that we're only makbid not to do laundry during the shvua shechal boy. But the Ladidan, according to us, that we follow the Ramah, yesh lahakmer b'tispeiris mishiva asa b'tamuz, then the restrictions on haircuts goes all the way back to the beginning of the 3 weeks, to shiva asa b'tamuz. So the same way we don't take haircuts during during the 3 weeks, starting shiva asa b'tamuz, we can't give a haircut to a cotton during the entire 3 weeks. The kibbutz, Merish Chaydish, and the restrictions on doing laundry apply not only during the Shvua Shechal Bay, but they apply to the entire 9 days. But Chayadim Kasav, the Chayadim writes, till Tzarech Ktanim, when it comes to doing the laundry of a child, Ein Lahachmer Aflafim Minagenu Ela B'Shabbazu. The Chayadim says that we could be makel when it comes to doing laundry for children. We could be makel. We don't have to be as machmer as we are in our own clothing. An adult's clothing, we don't do laundry already from the beginning of the 9 days. For the clothing of a child, we could be machmer only for the Shvua Shechal Bay. Now, how makbid do you have to be in doing the laundry of children? So let's take a look in the Ramah here. Says the Ramah, Haggah, Mihu, begadim shem alapafid behem haktanim legamri, the clothing that you use to swaddle a toddler, shemoitziim behem rei, umashtinim behem, where they excrete into these clothing, and they urinate into these clothing. So these are the diapers of a baby, or the clothing that you swaddle a baby in, that even in the days of diapers, still sometimes it leaks and it gets soiled. Hani vadi mishra shari. The Ramah says that certainly you're allowed to wash. Va'afilu bigdei sharktanim noyegim lahakil. And the Ramah says, even the begadim of other young children, we are noyeg to be makel. Okay, let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. It says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in pei gimel. Miu begadim, the clothing that you swaddle a baby in, that they get dirty, they soil it very frequently. When we come makam lo yichapsu harbe biyachad. However, even though you're allowed to wash these clothing of a small child, you shouldn't do a large load of laundry at one time. You should wash a little at a time what you need. V'yechabsu b'tzina, and you should do it discreetly, privately, im ein mechabse al gav hanahar, unless you're doing it by the riverside. So don't go to the laundromat if you can avoid it. Instead, do it in the privacy of your home. This falls out largely during the summer months, People don't necessarily have, I'm dating myself here. I'm going back to remember the days of bungalow colonies, not vacation homes and vacation complexes. I remember washing machine in a bungalow. That was almost as unheard of as an air conditioner in a bungalow. So the bungalow colony had a communal laundry room. So that's what you have. That's what you have. Ice cut and peidalid mishra shari. It's certainly mutter. It's certainly permissible to wash the begadim of a small baby that gets frequently soiled. This laundry has nothing to do with simcha. This is just a very practical, very clear need. You need clothing for the baby, and the baby soils his clothing all the time. Okay, now, lamaisa, halakha lamaisa, what do we do with this? How makbid do you have to be on the laundry of a child? I know that Rav Moshe Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh L'Vracha said that any clothing of a young child who is of the age that he regularly runs around and gets himself dirty. You take kids up to the mountains, you have kids in camp, you have kids in bungalow colonies, they're running around outside and they're going down to the lake and they're going to the creek and they're running around in the mud and in the dirt. There's no way that they keep themselves clean. They get themselves dirty all the time. So Rav Moshe said, any child that is of the age where this is normal, that they run around and they constantly get themselves dirty, you're allowed to wash what they need. Other poskim are a little bit more stringent. I think the Yeshiva Zatzal held this even during the Shvur Shechalbai. By the way, I forgot to mention, I wanted to mention earlier in the Shir. Earlier in the Shir, we had the Ramah that said that during the Shvur Shechalbai, if you make a siyum, you only invite a minyan mitzumtzum. You have only your close relatives and then a minyan mitzumtzum, maybe another 10 people mishum reyos. I know that in Camp Yeshiva Staten Island, the Yeshiva Zatzal, we made siyumim every night. Now again, that's a tzarchei rabim. That was a tzarech for the whole yeshiva and for all the families that were there in the camp. But we made siyumim every night up until Zayin. But it didn't matter if it was Shvur Shechalbai or not. So even if Hey and Vav of Av were Shvur Shechalbai, were in the week of Tisha B'Av, we still made siyumim. We stopped making siyumim at Zayin Av. That's when we stopped making siyumim. Okay. Now we go to Sif Tezvav. Mi shetakfu avelus shel meis v'shel shabezu. Somebody who is in Nebuch Le'aleinu in avelus over one of his close relatives, let's say a son who Nebuch is in avelus for a parent, and his shloishim ends during the Shvur Shechalbai. So mi shetakfu avelus shel meis, somebody who was overtaken by avelus for a mace, for a close relative, vishal shabezu, and now it coincides with the avelus of Shvur Shechalbai. So that means that his shloishim ended. He wasn't allowed to take a haircut already for the whole shloishim because he was in avelus. Normally, right after shloishim, he would go take a haircut if somebody tells him, hey, you really need a haircut. So he would go take a haircut, but now it's Shvur Shechalbai. V'hichbit sarai, he has a lot of hair. Says the Mechaber, mekel betar, he could lighten his hair using a razor. Avaloi b'misparayim, but not with a scissor. Says the Mishnah Berurah, is cut and pehei. Shal meis v'shal shabezu. The avelus that he has for the mace and the avelus of Shvur Shechalbai have coincided. What this means is, the shalmu yom shloishim shal avelus, he hit shloishim b'soich Shvur Shechal Tisha B'Av liyos b'soicha. During the Shvur Shechalbai, which is when the Mechaber says you're not allowed to take a haircut. So says the Mishnah Berurah, is cut mem pevav, mekel betar, he could lighten his hair, he could chop off some hair with a razor. Mishum shein ze yipui, he should use a razor but not a scissor, because a scissor gives a nice haircut, and we don't want to give a nice haircut now. So what he could do is, he's all overgrown, he could take one of those razors and knock, and hack some hair off. But not with a scissor. Ois cut and pei zayin, avaloi b'misparayim, v'zeu davka kishachal yom shloishim b'shavur shachal Tisha B'Av. This restriction, or this heter, is when the shloishim ends during the Shvur Shechalbai. Aval kishachal mikaydem lozeh, this restriction, if the avelus, if the end of the shloishim ends before the Shvur Shechalbai, Mutter l'saper, he could take a haircut. Ulechabes, and he could do laundry. Afli done, even according to us, shenoigin bazel lesser ba'alma hachishari. According to us, we don't take haircuts during the whole 3 weeks. Says the Chavetz Chaim, if somebody was in shloshim and his shloshim is over during the 3 weeks, but it ends before the shvua shechal bai, he could go take a normal haircut. Kemen shetakfu avolov. Ken kasav ataz b'shem abach. That's the opinion of the Taz. Aval Eliyah Rabbah sover de'in lahakel. The Eliyah Rabbah is more machmir. Kiyam shechal yom shloshim l'fnei rosh chodesh. Only if the shloshim ended before the 9 days. If it ended before the 9 days, he could take a regular haircut. If it ended during the 9 days, even if it's still before the shvua shechal bai, then the Eliyah Rabbah says he should be machmir and he should use a razor. The chen kasu kama achroinim, and the Sharetzian and Ois Katan Sadik Gimel says that b'makam atchak you could be mekel. Okay, Sif Tez Zayin already starts a little bit of a new topic, so I'm not going to start Sif Tez Zayin. We'll continue with Sif Tez Zayin tomorrow. Mitzvah Hashem. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be banking against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's refuahs and parnasa to all those in need. It's so hard. We're still hearing every day, such challenging news. We should only hear Besuris Taivis. We shouldn't hear any more Besuris Rois. The Rebbeinu Shalom should have Rachmanis on Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send a ruach of Tanchumin. The Rebbeinu Shalom should bring an end to this difficult, challenging time. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send a ruach of Simcha into the world. We should be mechazik in limud HaTorah, in shmiras hamitzvos, in tefillah, and in the schus of that, the Rebbeinu Shalom should bring simcha back into the world, and everybody should be well. Be well.